Stephen Hardy-Braz.
Hello, good afternoon.
All right, all right.
I thought that's who sign language I was. Afternoon,
Yeah.
Stephen.
Afternoon, Dan. Sorry, that was left over from the National Bike Summit.
Awesome. All right, Ebar. What is your first name, Ebar?
Elizabeth. Elizabeth A. Barnhart.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, it's but it's Barnhart?
Yeah, Barnhardt.
Uh-huh.
Oh. We have a co-worker with the same spelling last name. Awesome.
Oh, that's pretty unusual, at least in Eastern North Carolina. There's quite a few further west.
Yep. All right. And we are located west too. All right.
Okay.
Is Jonathan Kuhn going to be joining us, Aaron?
Yes, I'm on.
The other Jonathan.
I never
sorry.
heard back from him. It looks like we're just missing Betsy, and then we should be set for this focus group.
All right. Sounds good. Awesome. Well, let's give her a minute here because we just got off the phone with her literally 20 minutes ago. So that is good. All right. Dan, anything else we need to take care of logistic wise?
I don't believe so. And we are, just so everyone knows, we are recording this just so we can go back and check on our notes later.
Good. And so that means, Aaron, no more cussing. Okay. It's going to go out in the public. You don't want to embarrass anybody here. So
I can't promise anything. Sorry.
perfect. All right. Well, let's jump into it. Betsy's been through this. She's on the council and she's happy to help, but she's also been brought up to speed as of about an hour ago too. So hopefully she can join us momentarily. But you are important, so thanks for joining us. I am actually going to share my screen, and when I do that, Jonathan, can you welcome everybody?
Let's see. Okay, I had to unmute. Yeah, just wanted to thank everybody for participating. This is part of a series, a focus group of conversations we want to have to kind of further develop the 15th Street corridor plan. We're kind of midway through the process as far as soliciting public input and gathering survey data from the community, as well as historical data from previous attempts at this. But again, just working with Stantec Engineering, Mike and Dan have been a great resource to help push this forward. And again, as part of this, we're just gathering additional information to help conceptualize what the future of 15th Street could look like. Again, this will be part of a 3-day planning charrette, and then we'll have some follow-up discussion after that in another month or two to further the project and work towards some type of compromise with DOT. But again, just want to thank everyone for being here, and I will turn it over to Mike.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. Awesome. This works. So Stephen, thumbs up. You can see the screen here in the PowerPoint, or Elizabeth. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so let's jump right into it. We've got about 45 or 50 minutes to share. I'll just qualify. You guys are one of like 6 or 7 focus groups that we're hosting Tuesday and Wednesday. You're the third one today. We've already met with emergency services, fire, rescue, police. Awesome. We've also met with historic beautification gateway folks earlier today as well, and I heard different things, but we want to hone in specifically on the needs, the problems, maybe potential solutions for bicycle and pedestrian advocacy, and as it relates system-wide safety, it could be treatments, and so we wanted to keep that conversation going. A little bit about the project. You've already met Jonathan. Jonathan is your town manager and our project director, if you will, and Aaron Rule and Bariki are really handling the logistics, outreach, and PR campaign, which has been absolutely fantastic. For a community your size, I'm really pleasantly surprised about how much integration we're getting and how much feedback. Maybe that's writing on the wall for us later on. We may regret that, but all kidding aside, we love the transparency and we love working with you guys. Our team, my name's Mike Rutkowski. I'm an engineer and planner. I'll be your project manager, but really the folks boots on the ground doing all the work is folks like Amber Lewis, who's an urban designer, and Dan Henney, who's an attorney, awful, turned planner. So you can speak behind his back some other time, but yeah, smile at him every time you get a chance, because he is an attorney, but he loves planning the multimodal. With that, our schedule real quick. If you think about it in a football game, we are on the third quarter. The first and second quarter was all about the due diligence and data inventory. We also hosted that project symposium. So show of hands, how many folks participated in that January project symposium open house? I think we had a workshop. Show of hands. All right, awesome. That's good. So we got a lot of great feedback there. It was very interactive, very insightful, lots of passionate folks on there. I think there was about 90 folks on the Zoom, and quite a few other ones that are on Facebook or on calling in. So today we're in the third quarter, and today and tomorrow and Thursday we're got this 3-day design workshop. We got planners, engineers, urban designers, landscape architects, all under several roofs and all working on this project together. And some of them, a lot of them are listening to you right now. Their faces aren't being shown, but they're listening to the words and things that you share with us as we speak. We'll work on these designs. Honestly, by the end of Thursday, you're going to see some physical designs of how to redesign the street and how we're going to integrate bicycle, pedestrian, freight, buses, cars, mobility along this corridor. And then we'll take about 2 months or a month and a half to revise those and edit those design files. And then we'll come back to you in an open house and present your findings, your project, your corridor. So look forward to that. That'll be the fourth quarter, the open house over here, and a document to follow that as well. Jonathan, did you add something to add?
No, I think that was pretty comprehensive. I think that's kind of where we are. The process is going smoothly, but again, we've had a great deal of public input, so that's been refreshing.
Yeah, to say the least. That's great. So all right, enough about us. Let's hear from you. And so what we want to do is just kind of go across the board. Whoops, look at that, jumping ahead. We've got some due diligence, we can show it to you, but really this is about the bicycle pedestrian advocacy group and some of the needs and wants along the corridor and frustrations. So we'd like to hear from each of you. So Rod, you were the first one to join us. Thank you for doing that. I'm going to ask you to put yourself out there and say who you are and really why are you joining us and why is 15th Street so important to you? Go ahead, Rod.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you who are providing leadership and input. I am a 38-year resident of Washington, an avid recreational cyclist for the last 12 years. I average around 100 miles a week. And the only time I've ridden the entire length of 15th Street on a bicycle was when I was in a charitable event for Rotary, and I was forced to go down that road to complete my mission. It was one of those amazing fundraiser events. So you had to go from point A to point B to C, et cetera. I literally held my breath. None of the recreational cyclists around here, like myself, go down 15th Street because it's too dangerous. If you go down 15th and you look at the room you have for safety, there literally is just a tiny window. I cross 15th Street in my cycling events. But what we need, bottom line, not just for recreational cyclists like myself, but probably more importantly, the community that uses cycling as their primary mode of transportation. There's quite a few folks that cycle to Food Line, to urgent care, to the fast food restaurants in that general area, and they're putting their life, I believe, in their hands every day. And it concerns me. We need, it's pretty simple in my mind. What we need is a quality shoulder. And we also need gutters, rain gutters that are bicycle friendly. The ones that are there currently in the tiny space that's there on the ground are bicycle unfriendly. They're the kind that if you weren't paying attention, your skinny little bike tire is gonna go right in it and you're gonna do a face plant. So two things, bicycle-friendly gutters and a quality shoulder. And then I would feel a lot safer about going down 15th Street. There is a lot going on there. If I'm a recreational cyclist and I'm from out of town, every 3 years we have Cycle North Carolina come to town, and there's about 1,500 cyclists that descend upon this little town in this county. And if they want to go to Walmart or to one of the fast food joints, God help them under the current situation.
Terrific. Thanks, Rod. Yeah, good point. We've got to look at balancing, the kind of the 8 to 80 and the recreational cyclists, as well as the folks that rely on it as a mode of transportation. And honestly, you got some neighborhoods that are located off of that corridor that are low income, and you have a number of the rental units that have zero vehicle households. This is their only way of getting to 80. So good
You're
point.
right.
Thank you. Andy, you're up next. Look, he just turned himself off. You're up next. That's right. Go ahead.
Sorry. So trying not to repeat what Rod said. I'm a Washington resident. I've been here 4 years. I'm a dad. I'm a dad of kids who like to ride bicycles. They like to ride bicycles because in their early life, when we lived in a different town, we were able to ride our bikes to go grocery shopping, to go to restaurants. I rode my bike, I commuted to work. It was a 7.5 mile commute one way. And I think I put 3,000 miles on a bike in 4 or 5 months. I was dropping my child off at daycare, via bike, and then going on to work. This town's 5 miles wide, and I can't ride my bike half the places I'd like to go because you can't get there without getting hit. Back to what Rod said, 15th is dangerous. And I think he pointed out a lot of good points. I would specify that not just a shoulder, but a respectable bike lane or a bike path off the street would even be better. Actually, I would not allow my kids to ride in a bike lane on 15th. I would require them to ride a bike path or sidewalk or something. But yeah, we could cut down on traffic. I'd ride my bicycle to the store all the time if I could.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Andy. Yeah, and so we got to balance that as well. Interesting. Okay, running right down there. Let's go, Elizabeth. I think you need to unmute yourself if you don't mind.
Okay, I tried. All right. Well, so I'm a resident of Washington. I've been here a little over 28 years, I guess. And I live in a house now that's on West 13th Street, which actually runs parallel to 15th Street. And in the block that I'm in, there's no 14th Street in between. So 15th Street is just about in my backyard, and then Market Street intersects. So I'm in that 100 block of West 13th Street. And your questions went away, what specifically we were supposed to say. But I think the first one that you had up there was what's unique about 15th Street. And I think that's a really good question. But I guess actually what I was thinking about is maybe it's not just 15th Street that we need to think about. It's, in my case, a large residential neighborhood to the south, for many blocks to the south and a little bit west and a little bit east. And then on the north side, there's residential neighborhoods too. And there's just tons of people in there, whether it's single family homes or some of the lower income homes or elderly homes. And 15th Street, yes, is dangerous traveling on it, but I guess I almost think more about being able to cross it. And I guess one way to increase safety for everybody, cars pedestrians on foot, on bike, would be to make sure that we have safe places to cross it. And I guess I have a whole bunch of random thoughts that I've written down, but I can save those for the appropriate time. I guess one thing I would like to say, Erin, if she's here, we have only met on phone and computer, but she's been tremendously helpful, letting us get some paper surveys out to people. And I guess while mostly I'm speaking for myself, I also like to think that I've made observations and had conversations with people who regularly walk down my street, West 13th Street, as an alternative to 15th Street. And a lot of those folks are ones that also did not have capability or patience, whatever, to be able to do the survey online. And so there were a number of people that I think were very grateful to have an opportunity to put things down on paper. And I don't know how many people I've had say, thank you for making this opportunity available to us and caring about our community. And some of those got a mention, but a lot of the ones that don't have a car or rely on somebody else's car or have their bicycle or their foot traffic, I guess those are a lot of the folks I think about as well.
And thank you, Elizabeth. And honestly, thank you for your help too. You guys were on foot distributing surveys and getting them back to me. And so I had the easy part, just entering them. So appreciate your help. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I know that I know you printed a whole lot more than what actually got returned, it sounds like, but just for whatever it's worth, there were so many people that were grateful to be even considered that I think maybe have not always felt like they could participate.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. I thought we had a really good return for paper surveys, so I was really pleased. So thanks for your help.
Well, so thank you, and to Jonathan Russell too, wherever you are. Thank you for allowing that to happen.
Just
That's
to add a little bit of color to that, we had 400, and Michael have a slide for this. We had 421 survey responses. Approximately 40 of those came from the paper surveys, about 10%. So that's
Okay.
fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for an area your size, that's quite impressive actually compared to, other communities. Stephen, you are up next. Hardy Braz.
Hello there. I had my video off just because I was having lunch. So I didn't want to bore you with my eating. So, all right. I find myself in agreement with almost everything I think everyone's already said. So I'm trying to eliminate my notes because you don't want to hear me just say, yeah, just echo what Rod said. Yeah, what Rod said. Yeah, because I think as a certain type of cyclist, we see things very similarly because we are worried about our safety. But to echo what everyone said so far, I think we also feel a sense of responsibility for those cyclists and people riding bikes that maybe with whom we don't always identify with, but are just as valuable as their lives are just as important. So I don't live in Little Washington, but I ride there almost every week to go down to a couple of restaurants and businesses, but I select ones that aren't on 15th for the most part. Occasionally I have to run some errands and it is a risky corridor on which to ride. And my heart bleeds for the people that don't have the same recreational choices or are empowered and have privilege the way I do to make a decision. They're trying to get to work or home or shop for food. I'm here as a choice and I can go elsewhere. So I feel the more we can do with our privilege to ensure for better off we are. So rather than what Rod and others have said already, I'd like to think about slowing speeds along 15th, because it's the speed differential between whether I'm a pedestrian crossing the road, a wheelchair user, or a cyclist that gives me the greatest fear. It's that collision that could kill me or maim me in the process. I'd also like to think of if there was, especially for children or other people, a bike lane along the road that was protected. But along with protection comes maintenance issues, because you can't depend on the car wash to blow the debris out and what have you. So there's an ongoing city or NCDOT cost to keeping the maintenance of these things crack and pothole free. And the potholes that Rod mentioned, the drainage, the pothole sizes that concern us with our skinny bike tires are much smaller than one that may concern a car driver, because they could really throw us very easily on that. I'd also be concerned about issues that haven't been mentioned yet about the variety of entrances and exits and making sure sight lines are good for non-car users. making sure that the turn signals and traffic signals, if there's any dedicated lights, that they actually do include signal detection. Many times, if we're following the law, we get stuck at traffic lights because they don't work to detect vehicles. And that would include moped users oftentimes as well. Motorcycle users by state law can actually wait a couple cycles in a few minutes, and then treat it as a stop sign. We don't have that right as cyclists. So either we become scofflaws or we get stuck in a dangerous cross intersection of car moving traffic. I'd also like to think about this study perhaps include or encourage ways for businesses that are in the area to actually have parking for bicycles. I know we're talking mostly about the 15th Street as a transportation corridor, but part of transportation is making sure there's a safe place for you to store, lock up, or park your bicycle. We have these large parking lots for cars, but next to nothing for actually cycles themselves. I know your study and stuff will address ADA issues here, but when I think about the large event like Cycle North Carolina, which brings thousands of people to your city, hopefully this year just deferred from April to November, but some of them are elderly, some of them are disabled vets or other people with disabilities. And so it's not your typical single file bicycle with two wheels. They could be trikes and they could be wider. And you want to make sure that they are trying to get from their hotel, motel to a restaurant. Maybe it's fast food, maybe it's not, but they're going all over back and forth here. So we want to think about the capacity because your tourism business hinges upon people enjoying themselves, and they're not going to enjoy themselves if they don't feel safe. And if they do have problems, they won't come back and word will spread quickly. So I think we need to make sure that we are thinking about the capacity for a variety of types of riders, bikes, everyday recreational families that are transportation, not necessarily trails that meander, but more things that will get you from point A to point B to C or the opposite direction safely. I think all I need to add, because I think Rod and others have said things very well so far. But thanks for the opportunity to give some feedback.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen. And I like just go for it because you said a couple of things I want to highlight too. And I agree, right? I'm a planner and engineer. I've done this all over the nation. And the key is speed differential. Speed differential. People don't realize the importance of that and the perception. The faster you go, the lower the confined peripheral vision as a driver you have. So I'm not going to see Elizabeth out there on the side trying to take her bike and turn in there. So speed differential is really critical, and that's what kills. And honestly, we'll get into the crashes. You've got 3 accidents that led to fatalities only along this corridor. That's unacceptable in the past 5 years. I think 2 of them were pedestrian, maybe one of them was a bicyclist. But bottom line is, it's very unsafe. It's straight and flat out there. And when you have a sea of asphalt, people are going to go even faster because of it. There's no friction and nothing to slow them down. So we've got to be able to control that. The other thing is, you mentioned that this is my project. This is not my project. When Mike and Dan and Amber goes away, we go away. We're going back to Raleigh. This is your project. So I'm hoping, we are all hoping that whatever comes of this exercise, you have a vested interest. You may not agree with 100% of these, of the recommendations. We don't expect that. We never guarantee consensus, 100% consensus. If we did, we're liars. But we're hoping that you're going to walk away at least with your top issues being addressed, and that you're along for the ride to make sure that you help make some of those decisions. So I pick on you on that one, but Stephen, go ahead.
Right. No, I thank you for that. I don't know those particular 3 fatalities. And I know that sometimes some of the ones we've had elsewhere, the cyclists may have contributed because their behavior, because they're riding illegally on sidewalks and there's an intersection, whatever. But sometimes those individuals are riding on sidewalks to get to work or home, and they feel and they perceive the sidewalk to be safer than the street because the speed difference or whatever. So they choose to do things somewhat illegally or against local ordinance because there's a perception of safety because the alternative is too dangerous. And sometimes that leads to their injury or death.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Thank you for addressing all these issues.
No, I love it. I love it. Let's make sure we address these. Elizabeth. I think that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess one of the things I noticed, I was looking at some of the maps, I had to print them out for myself to refer to, but but yeah, it looked like you did have actual crash data from the last few years. But one of the things that was interesting as I've walked through the neighborhood and handed out surveys is how many people from years ago said, oh, I was in a car accident at Respis and 15th Street, or, oh, see the scar on my neck. That's when I went to a hospital. I was an innocent bystander at 15th and Market Street when we had thus and such accident there. So it's kind of a long history here and there. And I guess what I also wanted to point out is this is just information for that I guess made the police reports, I guess, or somebody's records. I guess what I think about is all the things that don't make it into print, all the near misses or the gazillions of times, whether I'm in a vehicle or on foot or walking with somebody, how many times I see people run a red light going east or west on 15th Street, or how long I can barely make it across 15th Street coming south on North Market, for example, just because I wait that split second for the light runners to get past me. And then in my vehicle, I can barely make it across those lanes of traffic before the lights turning red again. And that's me in a car, not somebody in a wheelchair or pushing a baby stroller or on foot. So I just wanted to add that 2 cents.
Amen, Elizabeth. Okay. And because it's the perception as an outsider, as a tourist coming in, is I don't shop and I don't do businesses around 15th. So you lose my money because it's perceived to be unsafe. So I go elsewhere. You want my money? Make it safe to be there.
That's right.
You've done a great
quote,
job with the
Dan.
pedestrian quarter downtown. Continue down to 15th.
That's a quote, Dan. That's that's deservedly so. So yeah, you're right. And it's funny because, and I love that, Stephen, because, and then I'll get off my soapbox, but when we work with these communities, you know, people are like, oh, we do one-way streets and speed this traffic up. I'm saying that's the last thing you want to do in your community, because why would you want to speed people up through your community as opposed to slowing down, figuring out where they're going to have lunch, where they're going to have coffee with their friend, and take in the community and spend money in your community. The last thing you want to do is speed up cars in your backyard. So I'll get off that soapbox. Elizabeth? Go ahead. You're here.
Yeah, I just wanted to second the slowing down might not be such a bad thing. And I've been told that this has fallen flat before and this may not be the appropriate forum for it. But I mean, sometimes there may be things that are just mutually exclusive. And I don't doubt that there's people that do want to get from Bellhaven to Greenville as fast as they possibly can. And I guess unfortunately, we're sharing the road with those people, you know, those of us who just want to walk to our neighbor on Oak Drive from this side or walk to the cemetery 2 blocks away. People drive to the cemetery to walk at the cemetery. And I just think that's ridiculous. But anyhow, I'm not opposed to slowing things way down. And I don't know if that means thinking about an alternative. I mean, if people really and truly do want to speed things up, I would love to see that someplace other than 15th Street, but that may be for another time.
Good point.
I
Thank you.
100% agree on the speed issue, Mike. I'm glad to hear you're an advocate there. We need to slow the traffic down, a road diet or whatever it's called. You know, and what is it? You know, what's the cost of a life? So people, it takes them 10 seconds more time to get, you know, over 15th Street. I've been guilty of driving too fast down 15th Street just because I can and not because I should. It's a very high speed traffic area.
Yep. Dan, another great quote right there. And you don't have to put his name to it, but I speed to it because I can, not because I should. But you're right. Anybody has a pair of car keys on this telephone call is one time or another sped through 15th Street themselves. So this is great. And Betsy has joined us too. Betsy, want to share some of your thoughts too, why you're here and why is it important?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Rod and Liz, as to the through traffic issue, you know, the city several years ago agreed to make 5th Street the through corridor. So, and then DOT owns that road as they do 15th Street. So 5th Street has become our through corridor. And that was sort of the agreed upon solution there was if people are going to traverse Washington and just go right through, that happens on Fifth Street. And what we don't want to do is have two parallel corridors not that far apart that both serve as, you know, throughways. That would be the mistake. And having designated Fifth Street that way, I feel like the expectation is reasonable that 15th Street can be more oriented towards the local business, you know, the short trips locally. Of course, you know, people can also use it to go through the city, but some of the design of the road influences their choice, right? So I just wanted to point that out in response to Liz and Rod, you know, saying what maybe we can't expect people to not use it as a through street. Well, we kind of made that decision with Fifth Street, so that's okay. You know, it's okay to not make everything a throughway. On the subject of pedestrian and bike, I mean, here's my opinion. I'll just contribute it like everybody has kind of. I would like to see the age 8 to 80 bike capacity, a safe network for 8-year-olds, a safe network for 80-year-olds, and everybody in between, including those with mobility issues, so that we really have a safe network. And that means separating. To me, for an 8-year-old, that means separating bike pathways for those who want separation and physical protection. I do. I mean, I'm a bicycle transportation planner, and I do not generally ride in bike lanes. I'm too afraid. Like most people, like 80% of people who can ride a bike, I'm very timid, and I don't like to mix with traffic. And I don't even like to be next to traffic, because I know I've seen the crash reports, and cars go into bike lanes that are not protected. So I like the protected network for myself. And for those who maybe are at the youngest and oldest end of that spectrum. Totally agree with the comment about utility cyclists, people who go to work or run errands. You see them all over our city. I mean, you can't go anywhere in our city without seeing those utility cyclists, and they ride the beater bikes. And I know that our bike shop, you know, prioritizes them as clients. When they need their bike repaired, our bike shop tries to put their stuff on the fast track, because they're really relying on that bike to go to work. You see them parked at the Food Lion on 15th Street. You see them parked at the food service businesses. You know, they're going into work at one of the sandwich shops or the tortilleria, and there's no bike parking, and those people are incredibly at risk, as Rod mentioned. Okay, so I'll just go down my bullet. We have a side path along North Market Street, goes all the way to the airport and our recreational fields, which is where our athletic leagues for the kids take place. And so it'd be great to see a really solid connection with that Market Street side path going north of town. Liz, I think, mentioned the walking. People use the cemetery as a walking path, and I do myself. I go out there all the time, but I rarely walk to the cemetery because I don't want to cross 15th Street on foot from my side of town. So I could be there like in 6 minutes on foot, just about, but from where I live. But let me turn off the phone.
All right, we got Betsy there. She's sharing a lot,
All
but
right.
that's okay.
My phone's going wild. Hold on. Forgot to turn that off. Okay. So cemetery and crossing 15th Street at Market Street would be great. Our town is really small, and you can be across town like in 3 minutes on a bike and like in 9 minutes on foot, but not if you have crossing barriers. And the barrier is really not the distance, it's the safety and the conflict with cars. So 15th, I see 15th Street as a big part of a successful walk bike network. It's really essential link. So we should lavish attention on that aspect of this project. Street trees, if you're walking in our climate, at least 4 months, 5 months of the year, you really need street trees for shade. And I actually, like a lot of people, I do these shade hopping. I choose my walking route depending on where the most shade trees are in a lot of months of the year. The substitute trips, I think actually a lot of people would use, who are using 15th Street in their cars, you might actually get a 5% or maybe even more mode substitution. If we had safe walking and biking along 15th Street, we would, I think, see some of the neighborhood local traffic in cars. Some of those people might actually choose to go on foot or on a bike, and you know, not a whole lot, but enough that it would be meaningful. And that's about it. I think everybody else, you know, I endorse all of the previous remarks. Good stuff.
Awesome. Thanks, Betsy. Anna, you joined us a little bit late, but why don't you share your thoughts why you're here and things you want to see change along 15th Street?
Okay, so I moved to Washington about 4 years ago. I currently live in Smallwood, and I've also lived on Oak Drive. Prior to moving here, I biked to the grocery store. I biked if we went downtown in the evenings, those kinds of things. And my first impression of Washington was, why are people driving so fast? I'm going to die. So yes, I agree. And it's citywide, so I don't know how you control the speed problem across the town, but I do know that there's got to be a better intersection at Market and 15th. It doesn't make sense that kids in the downtown area can't get to the pool in the summer safely. It doesn't make sense that all of Smallwood in the evenings isn't going on bike to the waterfront to enjoy the sunset. Like it's a small enough town that we should be able to move about this town on foot or on bike, and we're not able to do so. And I find it interesting that 5th is supposed to be that throughway, but I feel safe crossing 5th. I don't feel safe crossing 15th. So, you know, I think that's worth mentioning. I've read numerous articles that basically state if you want people to use bike paths, you have to think from the perspective of a mother with small children. And I am a mother with small children, and that is absolutely true. So a wider shoulder on 15th, I still wouldn't use it. I have my kids now they're 7 and 5, and they are 8 and 5. I'd hate to offend, sorry. But they are with me, and they're excellent on their bikes, but their level of control is not my level of control. And now that they're no longer on my bike, I can't grab them very easily when they're on their bike. So there has got to be some kind of division between the traffic and me for me to take my kids biking with me. ADA compliance for a lot of this. I think that if you solve the ADA issues, you solve a lot of the pedestrian issues. It just kills me the number of motorized wheelchairs that I see on 15th and on Highland and on those roads that there's no shoulder, and it's insane to me. I want to follow them closely and like guide them down the road, because it's an accident waiting to happen for those that have not already happened. So, and 15th is one of the major access routes to food for people. So the fact that people can't get there safely on foot or on bike doesn't work for a large percentage of the population in this town. So yeah, it's slowing people down. Major.
Right. So thanks, Anna. And that kind of reiterating some of the things that we heard previously too, and also from different stakeholder groups. Even the police say, I think someone mentioned on this conversation about people trying to run the lights. I'm like, really? That happens a lot in Little Washington? I'm like, But the police, Chief Drakeford had mentioned that, and that just is a little bit insane to me. But yeah, a lot of reaffirmation, I guess, of some of the issues that we're dealing with. I'm not going to go through too much of the outreach. Again, you had a tremendous amount of survey responses and interactive maps, stuff like that. A lot of folks, their number one thing we heard was just simply trying to cross the road. And that's embarrassing. I will say some of the biggest concerns, when they drill down to it, people, they want to talk about solutions, but they have a hard time articulating what the problems are. And so that's why we dig deep to ask those questions. What is the problem we're trying to solve? And wholeheartedly, I think safety was paramount in the responses we got. That's the number one issue. Even DOT said this is a safety problem. It's not a congestion problem. Yes, there's a lot of traffic, but it's not congestion, it's safety. And when you look at the safety numbers, the crash rate, you're actually 1.4 times the state average crash rate for a similar 4-lane road elsewhere. And that's not a good category to be in. So it's much more unsafe than other complementary roads throughout the state. Biggest concern is there's no left turn lane, right? And when you get up to the intersection and other guys turn to the left and you're trying to turn left, you can't see around them. So you play that chicken and egg, right? You play that, all right, wait, who's going to go first and take a left, right? Rod is laughing because everybody's done that. It's terrible. You take your life in your own hands.
But I'm the guy in the right lane.
Yeah, they all, and everybody jockeys into the right lane. So number one accident type is rear end, because cars are stopping when they don't expect to stop. And the next one is side swipes. And so you're right, Andy, it's ridiculous. As far as who feels the most threatened, it's clearly pedestrian and bicycles. There's absolutely no amenities, not only get people along the corridor, but across the corridor. A basic premise for living in a city is you've got to be able to cross the street. That's it. And so intersection improvements, what needs improvements, pedestrian facilities, you name it. Even when we ask them, then we ask them the tough question, hey, you guys went through this 4 years ago, but I don't think you ever asked what the problems were or potential solutions. When DOT came back, they just gave you a solution, and it was widening out and taking, an extra 80 feet of right of way. When we asked people about the desire to impact right of way, almost 70% said, this is too important, stay away from right of way acquisition. Now, we won't be able to completely avoid maybe some slivers of right of way acquisition, but we're not going to go in here thinking that we're going to do what they did 3 years ago and say we need another 45 feet on both sides. This just ain't going to happen. So after all this is said and done, I want to show you some of the ideas and go through kind of the framework. And I think a lot of this, you may not agree with everything you see and hear, but you will understand because all of the issues that you guys just raised are articulated and thought in this framework. This is and I'll start with the cross section. This is your cross section. It's 4 lanes. It's basically 10 or 11 foot lanes. And then you have curb and gutter, and then you have a verge area. No amenities for bicycle, pedestrian. We are actually thinking about repurposing some of that asphalt and repurposing some of that right of way as well. So bringing in the curb on the north side, one or the other sides, and putting in that multi-use path. I guess someone brought up the 8 to 80, and so that someone from 8 to 80 can use it, but providing enough, 12-foot lane or 13-foot lane so that, Rod, if you, during off peak, if you comfortable, you can ride your bike on that as long as it's a good wide laneage, and also we'd have roll curb in the inside so that fire and rescue, if something happened, they could use that. So this would be a combination of 2-lane divided with pocket medians, but predominantly a 3-lane section. So you'd have the safe haven to make a left turn in an exclusive left turn lane. All of this street trees, we haven't added any stuff like that, but that's the basic premise here. Any thoughts on what you're seeing here? Again, some people say, widen it out. Well, you tried that last time and you got tarred and feathered. Not you, but DOT did. The next thing is, what is it that we're trying to address? And really, it's safety. Number 2 is lack of multimodal. You can't get across the street. There's no crosswalks and there's no sidewalks and no bike facilities. And then number 3 is congestion. Maybe it's helping traffic flow a little bit better. I got a thumbs up from Andy, but will this be a one size fits all? Maybe not, but this is a good foundation, I think, for moving forward and controlling speed. And someone else said it. I think Andy, you brought it up. This is a citywide problem with cars speeding. The only way to control speed is through redesign. That's the only way. If you try to put up a speed limit, and right now it's 40 miles an hour, 45 here, and you try to put up 25, no one's going to pay attention to that. Nobody, including the people that have a pair of car keys on them and listening and talking on this Zoom meeting. So we've got to redesign it, and we can start with 15th Street as we speak. So as you look forward, how do we apply this cross section to the entire corridor? This is something we put together late last week, and what it shows is very interesting. If we apply this, repurpose in and put in side path, you can see in here the side path is on the north side here. Everything that you see in here, for the most part, stays within the current right-of-way. There might be slivers, like intersections, that we may have to go beyond that, but for the most part, it's going to stay there. And what this creates now we look at high-quality intersections, pedestrian countdowns, high visibility crosswalks, pedestrian lighting, ADA compliance. Right, Anna, like Andy, you guys brought up, and then now you say these are high-quality intersections. So how far is it to get to the closest high-quality intersection, right? These are 5-minute walk shed areas. This is representative of a quarter mile, 5-minute walk zone, right? And so now you look at it, and if we incorporate in certain areas, this is an actual signal here, right in front of, I think this is the Tractor Supply, and then there's Market over here. There's a gap in there. So maybe we can include a mid-block crossing at this location to close that gap. Now what we're saying, when we look at it holistically, right? Here's Brown Street over here, right? Here's Market over here, and here's Caroline Avenue over here. And now when you look at the walk shed, what this is telling us is that everything is interlinked, which means anybody that comes to the intersection, no matter where and what side they come to, they're within 60 seconds to 90 seconds of a high visibility crossing, that they are protected. That's a huge thing to tell this community now, because that was the number one issue that they had issues with. And so holistically, when you look at it, how it all fits together, it really frames out a nice, safe corridor that people can go east and west and north and south quite easily. So I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions about what we just showed, and any thoughts.
Quick question. So instead of 4 lanes for car traffic, it would be 2 lanes.
But most importantly, Rod, let's think about what's happening here. That 4-lane, I got 1 4-lane in the entire city of Raleigh, and it's horrific. And why? Because every time that car wants to stop and take a left, now you have to do what Andy said. You have to jockey over position. You're looking over your right shoulder. You don't even care about slowing down. You're just zipping over. And that's the most dangerous feeling that you could ever possibly get. Now, complicate it and consider that there might be a pedestrian out there, or there might be a bicyclist. That's a scary, scary thought. So yes, now the carrying capacity, you're on the threshold of a 3-lane road. There's no doubt. You got 13,000 vehicles all the way up to 20,000 vehicles on there. I worked on the first project, Complete Streets road dot I ever did, was Hillsborough Street in Raleigh. That too was a 4-lane. It carries more traffic than what you guys have, and it works fantastic. It's been a 2-lane divided 3-lane section now for probably 15 years. But yeah, so Rod, yeah, you're gonna have some bumps and bruises. This is my thought. As long as I'm moving, I may not be able to go 45 miles an hour on this corridor, but as long as I'm moving and I'm not stopping and going and stopping and going and stopping and going, I'm happy. And I think that's what we got to translate to people a little bit. Slow down the cars, but you're going to continue to move. Good observation. Yep. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I had a question. where you have circles that say mid-block crossing, does that mean in the middle of a block, not at an intersection, or does that just mean midway between your existing traffic lights?
Both. One of them is a true mid-block down here near the residential area here where we're projecting on putting in a portion, a median pocket. The other one is going to be opened up at the intersection. Help me out, Van Moren Street.
There's a Van Norden Street.
Van Norden, yeah. And that'll be an open because we want to allow left turns in and out of that on the south side and north side. So one is going to be at that intersection. We'd rather be at close to the intersection if it's close at all. And that way we can have the crossing. But the other location will have a true pedestrian refuge using the median. Yeah.
So I wanted to just point out how I see people actually cross the street sometimes. So the 15th and North Market intersection, one, when you talk about maybe improving that intersection, will you be able to incorporate signals that will address traffic on Market Street in addition to on 15th Street? Because like right now, for example, going north on North Market, the number of lights up above doesn't correspond to the number of lanes down below. And you can't see it from far off. If a car happens to be on the painted arrows on the ground, if you're behind that first car, you can't see what's painted on the ground, and there's no sign showing arrows up above to tell you what the signals are going to say. So to me, that's just one example of where if it was clearer and if you could see it from further away, that would cut down on a little bit of confusion, whether it's bikes, people, cars, whatever.
So let me make sure I understand what you're saying. Right now, I'm going to interpolate a little bit here. It's green balls, right? You're just seeing green balls. There's no arrows, no protection.
Well, actually, this is a pet peeve of mine. There is actually an arrow, but it's not a dedicated left green arrow, which to me adds confusion because I think people see a left arrow in my natural impulse would be to go. Even if it's blinking yellow, but that does not mean it's protected left turn.
Correct.
You just get a yellow blinking arrow, and to me I guess I'm an older driver now. To me, that's just a different way of saying left turn yield on green, but it adds extraneous decision making.
As an engineer, I agree with you. I always struggled with that. I understand what a green ball means, and the blinking yellow arrow, it's just in your face, like, do I have the right of way here? And so, yeah, I feel for you on that. We're also going to do a better job of pavement markings. And that's the other thing that you brought up, to make sure that people know what lane to get into. This is going to be very, very, very predictable. So much more different than what you're faced with today. Because that middle lane, that flip flop lane, that dedicated left turn only lane is not a through lane. So you're going to know exactly where you need to be to take a left turn lane. You're not going to be able to take a left turn lane from a through lane. And so that's the difference between what we're suggesting, just a traditional 3-lane road with median pockets in there versus your 4-lane and you're jockeying for position. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that where I observe people actually crossing 15th Street in order to avoid that intersection at 15th and Market, sometimes people will go to the east to Bonner or Nicholson to cross to the cemetery or to that side of the road, for example, or the lady from Smallwood or Oak Drive. I've seen a lot of people that come out of Smallwood or out of the Oak Drive area and come over to Respis and cross 15th Street at Respis. And I guess at either of those two places, a few blocks east or west of North Market Street, at least by doing that, it's not a controlled intersection, but the number of possible collisions that you have to filter through before deciding to cross the street is reduced. I mean, at least you've only got 2 lanes coming from each direction instead of oncoming traffic that could go straight or could go right or could go left.
Good point.
And lanes that are splitting into multiple lanes. So I don't know how that factors into where you decide to put your mid-block crossings, but it just, I mean, people are already sort of trying to find a less hazardous crossing, I guess, even though I always learned that a controlled intersection was the best place to cross, but it almost doesn't seem that way.
Yeah.
The advantage of going down Respis or the other side of Market Street are simply that then you can have the entire road to yourself when you're on a bike. You know, you can bike down Respis all the way downtown and not meet up with a car.
Right, right. And I guess one of the things
that intersection right on 15th in front of the cemetery, unless traffic is slowed down, because we'll ride up, I don't even know what that is, Bonner or one of those, but then go over to Market for the intersection because that curve makes it a blind curve where people are going 55 miles an hour. And so I won't cross on near Bonner simply because I can't see traffic on either coming from either direction.
Oh, I see what you're saying. The dead man's corner. Go ahead, Stephen.
Like, I'm glad you brought up Hillsborough Street in Raleigh as an example. I understand you having a job and a task that's as challenging, and I don't envy it, because there you have to compete with the Wolf Line buses dropping people on and off. You have on-street parking. You have new traffic circles that were double lane. It confused people. It became a single. And then you have a bike lane kind of thrown in there at the end. The problem, one of the problems I have riding on Hillsborough is the bike lanes disappear at the traffic circles. So you're forced into this gauntlet of merging, cars coming in at high speed, cyclists at a little bit of slower speed. I'm just not that fast. I can't pedal my bike at 45 or whatnot. I'm working at it though. But then you also have on-street parking, which now all the bike lanes are in the door zone. So here's my pushback on this. Your current basic design here is, if you have an outside lane of 13 feet wide and it's a single lane, you're like that close to having enough room for cars and a bike lane, but you don't actually paint the bike lane. You maybe paint sharrows. So now if I'm riding by myself, I may be comfortable with cars whizzing by me and I can share that lane comfortably or tensely. But if I was Andy wanting to ride with my kids, or I'm riding with an older person, I'm going to take that lane. Now everybody has to share at my slower speed at 10, and it ticks the drivers off because I'm only taking up a foot, but I'm using the entire 13 feet. And it looks selfish, but it's for my safety. So how do we make sure that, again, Andy's kids feel safe to either ride alone or together, and you still manage that space that we can be protected as we ride down here and
All
not
right.
be forced into these gauntlets of danger?
I'm with you, Stephen. Okay.
Okay.
If you're a 10-year-old kid that barely knows how to put on your helmet, are you going to be in the middle of this 15,000 vehicle travel lane that's going 35 miles an hour? Are you going to be on this nice, comfortable side path that's made for bicyclists just like you?
As a parent, I may want my 7 or 8-year-old child who's out there riding alone on a side path, but doesn't mean they're not going to be with their friends jumping over to that traffic lane because they are a vehicle. At age 10, my son was probably going to be in with those vehicles.
All right. So here it is, Stephen. Is your son doing that night now, today?
Yeah.
All right. They're not going to do it. This is safe haven, or they might even get on the sidewalk, just like someone else brought that up. I think Andy or someone else did. The kids are going to stay over here. That's what's going to happen.
Okay.
I'm with you.
But if I'm riding with an elderly person or another cyclist,
they're all right here.
13 feet to share.
Now
it gets tense.
Right. The spandex folks, like who was our earlier caller today? Well, anybody on this call that does long distance, Dan or anybody else, they're gonna predominantly probably want to stay in here. They don't want to deal with people, so they will stay in there. But that's not even to prevent them from doing it today. It's just not happening, and because it's so unsafe. I think what this is doing is two things. One, it is repurposing the asphalt. I get that. It's also, we're trying to build in some verticality and create a sense of enclosure using a little bit of a median, maybe some street trees on the outside, inside with some lighting. When you build in that sense of enclosure, people are not going to go as fast as a driver because they're going to expect, it's that friction. Just like if I put parking on the side there, people are going to slow down too because they don't want that errant door opening up and taking it off. So, and that rate, exactly, Andy. So,
but for an extra 6 inches, 8 inches, whatever the engineering is,
right,
you could have a white and some thermoplast. You could have a white line and put some armadillo cement bulbs down and actually make it semi-protected, and I'll feel a lot more safer for my kids or for myself to ride. Or better yet, put some bollards up and make it an actual real protected bike lane for everybody.
Yeah. So here it is. We could do on-road bike lanes,
Mhm.
but we wouldn't be able to do the sidewalks. And so you think about that. So this would be protected bike lane on something like this is at least 7 feet. And now you're eating into the side path. And so you see what I'm saying? We only have 60 feet to work with. I'm with you. That was one of the questions that we had to talk about trade-offs. What the side path does, now it doesn't mean that the spandex wearers of the long distance folks couldn't get into this travel lane. They most likely will, but it's the 8 to 80 that Betsy brought up and Andy brought up and Elizabeth brought up. This is going to cater to a lot more user-friendly at a slower, more predictable pace as well. But if you do a protected using bollards or some kind of verticality or even curbing bike lane or a cycle track on the road, that means the side path has to go away to stay within the right of way. I'm with you. So it's really up to you guys to determine what you want. Andy, this is good. This is a tough, I'm not saying I have the answers, but this is a very tough trade-off. This is the biggest one that we need to consider right here, right now.
And this is tough. So as a cyclist and as a commuter and as a dad and as a person who wants to be able to go get groceries on a bicycle, I think this is probably the best scenario. You know, if you look at the people who are trying to ride their bikes right now because that's the only thing they can use to get to the store, and they're doing it and it's dangerous, they're going to use the sidewalks. They're not going to use a bike lane. You know, when I'm on my road bike, I want to use the bike lane. When I'm on my commuter with my kids and or my cargo bike, you know, I've got a 3-wheel cargo bike that's, you know, it'll fit down an ADA compliant path. You know, I can carry my kids and my groceries on it. I'm going to be riding on the sidewalk. But I agree, Steve, that just a little bit more and you could get a good bike lane. But I don't think the majority of our population is going to appreciate the bike lane for what it is, and they're going to be on the sidewalk because they feel safer.
I tend to agree. And one of the things that when we were looking at the consultant teams to do this contract, one of the things Mike's team brought to the interview was some demographic information. And I wrote it down because it was so important to me at the time. Of the households within a quarter mile of the 15th Street project corridor, 56% of them are minority, people of color households, and those people are more at risk, and their usage of bikes tends to be more for work and shopping. And the other thing about the quarter mile residential radius was that 20% of the renter households, 20% of them have no motor vehicle. Like, they're completely reliant on biking, walking, and maybe some form of, friendly ride sharing with people they know. So 20% of the renter households, which is a huge, something like a third or 40% of the households in that radius are renters. And then 20% of those have no vehicle. And I think, like, knowing how our utility bike population uses our streets, it's really, they're on the sidewalk, they're comfortable out of traffic. They go in traffic only because they have to. There's no other choice. And I feel like the road cyclists or the vehicular cyclists are usually going to be on the other side of town, or they're riding a long recreational loop that goes on our NC bike route 2, which goes right through Washington and out in the country, but it doesn't really connect to 15th Street. So I feel like if we have to prioritize and make trade-offs, the way more important population to serve is that utility bike impoverished slash, running errands and using bikes because of necessity population. So, and we're never going to teach those people the rules of riding a bike as a vehicle. I mean, it's just like we can throw ourselves against the education component of that and we won't reach them. They're just going to ride the bike the way they ride a bike, intuitively.
Betsy, I agreed. I think that, that 20% or that, larger numbers, that's a very important priority and population to also serve. And you're right. I think sidewalks probably serve them, or bike paths that are separated like that, like a sidewalk, are important. But it's interesting that we frame this right now as, well, the turn lane, all this dedicated space down the middle, that left turn lane, that's sacrosanct for those few cars that are going to turn left into businesses, whatever. We won't touch that. But now we're making it, if you want protected bike facilities, it's going to take away from the pedestrians or the sidewalks. Why don't we reduce that median a little bit if we're still saying the same right away, and use those cars turning to slow down other cars? Because the engineering for the slowness is going to keep everybody safer. Drivers, pedestrians, cyclists, wheelchair users, etc.
Yeah. So just to answer Stephen, so I'll get to you in a second, Elizabeth, we'll finish up. But yeah, no, at the intersections too, the problem with not having that left turn in there, or at the signals too, and the intersections that are non-signalized for turning vehicles, and so people are going to have to go around it. So it's not only for the mid block, and I love the idea of doing the 2-lane divided on there to slow down vehicles, but yeah, sometimes that middle lane in there, and again, it doesn't have to be 13 feet or anything like that. It could be 10 or 9 even, but for that turn lane, that is. And so, but that's probably needed at the intersections as well as some of the driveways, not all of them, but I'm with you. Elizabeth, would you?
I just
Matt,
wanted to mention
Mike.
that before this discussion today, I didn't know you were considering a separated path that bikes could use. And I'm so relieved to know that that's a consideration. I tend to be first and foremost worried about the people walking, either of necessity or recreationally, or in a wheelchair, or any of these other utilitarian reasons. But I guess I would defer to the more avid cyclers on their perspective from a cycler, but my perspective as a driver that would really like to be able to interact with bicyclists. Sometimes when there's a bike lane, it's still very confusing, and several folks this afternoon have mentioned the lane might just end, or it comes to an intersection where all of a sudden a bike lane that was part of one lane, suddenly it splits into multiple lanes at an intersection, and you don't know if the bike is at the right side of the through lane or the left side of the bike lane. I mean, it's very confusing as a driver, and I just think it would reduce confusion a lot if I didn't have to worry about merely a painted stripe on the ground that I didn't know what was going to happen. So I love the idea of some kind of separation. And I guess part of what was scary to me with the previous design is that DOT proposed was that not only were they going to increase the width of all the lanes, that it didn't strike me as them wanting to repurpose some of that space. It was just going to be a whole lot more pavement. And what I was really concerned about was that it would funnel a lot of traffic to the side roads, like West 13th Street, where people are already going to walk and bike to avoid 15th Street. And I thought it would not only not fix those things on 15th Street, but it would make it worse where people have already sought refuge. So for whatever that's worth, I guess I think having a separated space for bikes is a wonderful way to keep bikes able to use 15th Street. And I guess I'm not opposed to using a little bit more space if you need it, because it sounds like even if you need a little bit more space, it's not the drastic taking and paving that was proposed before.
Right. Stephen, do you have?
So Mike, just help me with the math here. If we made that middle turn, say 9 feet, the average car is 8 feet wide, so you have 9 feet there, and you have a total here
I
right
drive
now
a big wide truck.
of 30. Well, okay.
as do
Let's
lots
just
of
play with the
other
numbers for
firms.
just a moment, though.
Yeah,
You
I
have
pull a boat
39
trailer.
feet right now in the right of way that you can use. All right. So we're doing the math here. Rather than 13 divided by 3, we make that middle 9. We got 29 feet left. Well, that's 14 and a half for the other 2 lanes. My understanding is a bike lane is 5 feet in width. So you are really 1 foot away from having bi-directional bike lanes that can be protected by armadillos or whatnot over that paint, full car lanes and a middle lane, 1 foot.
I'm
That
with
doesn't
it.
have to
Hold
really
on,
impact
hold on.
that sidewalk very much.
All right, you gotta put in the curb and gutter. You have curb and gutter on the outside, you have curb and gutter on the inside. That's where your drainage is too, so.
Which in Greenville, they include that in the 5-foot bike lane, right or wrong, but they got
Oh,
away with
no,
it.
no. Forget it.
Okay.
No curb and gutter in the bike lane,
Okay.
ever.
Here's your answer.
Well.
No, but I would say this
But
though.
I see where Steven's going, yeah.
Yeah, no, but I would say this, and this is rightfully so. I mean, it could be something like this, Stephen. I'm with you. There could be an option, right? If we're going to move the curb, I'd like to move. My thought is all the curb we're moving is this guy right here. This is what it could be an option. I would love to see you guys have a protected, whether it's curbing or bollards or the armadillos along there. That's going to take probably 1.5 feet max, right? But I would love to see that and have a 10. DOT won't let us have anything less than a 10-foot on here because of the emergency service vehicle and the tractor trailer. It's got to have a WP. I get that.
Okay.
But even with that, but what we can do is if there's an option on one side, if we're moving the curb in one side, we don't move it in the full way, but we take a strip of maybe 4 feet on the outside, 4 or 5 feet on its continuous north side all the way through in order to get armadillo protected 5-foot bike lanes.
Okay. The other creative solution I've seen in Washington, D.C. is a bi-directional bike path or bike paths on one side. You don't need 10 feet for that. You can actually make it narrower, but it's bi-directional, and the cyclists will figure out they don't do head-on collisions. We're nicer to each other.
Perfect.
So I think the math can still work here, is my point. That's all. But I don't want to jump over other people.
This is great. I love it.
I like Stephen's second suggestion better. And I'll tell you why. Because if we take and repurpose motor vehicle lane space and have a bike lane, bi-directional bike lane, one on each side, and we have a side path, that's going to kill it. Politically, this town cannot handle it. You've just produced 2 redundant bike facilities and you've reduced travel lanes. Trust me, I know City Council will choke hard on that. They don't get it. They have trouble wrapping their heads around, I'm on tape here, but they do have trouble wrapping their heads around the idea that you can go from 4 lanes to 3 lanes and have it flow better, or have it be, comparable in flow. They choke on that. Doesn't matter. The engineers explain it over and over. But they have a very basic gut understanding of how this stuff works, and they will not, 2 types of bike facilities and reduction in motor vehicle lanes this thing will go down in flames. That's what I'm worried about. It's not that I would love that, but the council is not made up of people like me. Yeah.
All right. No, that this is some great dialogue, and I'll tell you that 60 feet is so precious. I love the idea, Stephen, we could do that. And let me take a little bit closer look. I know it's going to be a hard thing to pull off, but you got some things working against you. Perception that Betsy brought up, and then just really putting in a protective facility in there, the right-of-way issue. But Elizabeth, I'm going to close it up pretty soon here because we've already lost a couple people. But Elizabeth, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I just was curious, I guess I keep thinking, sidewalks or walking on 2 sides would be wonderful. I don't know how much of a bottleneck actual crosswalks or improved intersections would be, but I mean, if crossing was easier and more protected and not a problem for people crossing the street, then could you have sidewalk on one side and dedicated bike path on the other and not need sidewalks on two sides or something?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Just trying to figure out how that would be put in there. It'd almost be like a protected bikeway on the other side too. Our problem with it is the 60 feet is symmetrical, right? And so we'd still have to bring in the curbing. Now you're saying potentially even bringing in the curbing on both sides. I don't know how that would translate there, but let us take a look at, I want to do, we'll take a look at crunching the numbers a little bit, and see what it would take and if it would require additional right of way, which I think it would, and it is what it is, but we got to build it in accordance to MUTCD and the NACTO design standards on this. And Betsy brings a good point. You don't want your cyclists, especially long distance, to deal with a joint because of the pan of the curb and gutter. So we'd have to adhere to that to see what that would look like. Because I think they actually require 6-foot bike lanes in accordance with NCDOT when you have curb and gutter, which is terrible. But let us at least take a look at that. I think what we have here, though, is a great opportunity to slow down vehicles and really cater to the 8 to 80. And if we hone in on the intersections and really do a good job of getting people across there too, I truly think it's going to be just 10 times better than what's out there today, 100 times better than what's out there. But is it ideal? Absolutely not. Is it going to appease everybody? Absolutely, it won't. But I think it's going to be an amenity that people will come to instead of going away from. It'll be attraction for businesses, for trip making, and for recreation. So with that, folks, I'm going to let you off the hook a little bit. Dan, we got to memorialize this and then get ready for our 5 o'clock. I'm going to check in with our urban designers and engineers and see how far along they are. But yeah, we really appreciate your efforts, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you to everybody for your input.
Thanks again.
Good
Thank you for a
experience.
fantastic conversation.
Awesome. That'll be good.